All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Upstream's first Indisposable Live of 2025. I'm Sydney Harris, Upstream's Policy Director, and I will be your host today. I'm really excited about this live stream today because we are launching our newest position paper, which is all about the vision and playbook for scaling reusable packaging systems within EPR programs. One housekeeping note before we begin: if you were planning to attend the speed networking session after this, we are unfortunately a bit short-staffed today, so we aren't going to be able to run it, but we do look forward to bringing that back at our next live stream. So first, a quick disclaimer before I jump in. This live stream may not be ideal for beginners. We are going to jump straight in and use a lot of EPR jargon. I will try my best to spell things out, but we know most of you are already well versed in EPR and you really just want to get into it. My first slide is going to exemplify this. I'm not going to read through the status of each state, but as you can see, the 5 packaging EPR programs enacted to date in the US are off to the races. Circular Action Alliance, or CAA, as you'll see on the slide, has been selected as the Producer Responsibility Organization, or PRO, in 3 states so far, and there are draft program plans already in Oregon and Colorado. Implementation begins in Oregon this summer, closely followed by Colorado and Maine next year. And each of these programs includes reuse provisions. Once again, I'm not going to read through this whole chart, but we know it is a handy resource. In fact, we've actually created a home for this on our website, and I think that link will be going in the chat soon. So feel free to check back in anytime as we keep this updated. The point is, now is the time, while these programs are being established, to properly integrate reuse. In our new paper, we call for an ambitious public commitment from packaging PROs to lean into reuse systems. The reuse provisions in each of the 5 new laws may be different, but a comprehensive commitment to reuse should transcend legal compliance. This is about true leadership at a pivotal point in the development of these programs. In the paper, we outline 4 strategies for a best-in-class PRO. First, adopt a long-term reuse vision and set consistent program goals. Next, offer incentives and technical assistance to any producers exploring or choosing reusable packaging. Third, provide direct funding for reuse systems. And finally, always maintain transparency to keep the public's trust. I will get into each of these in more depth soon, but first a couple of context-setting notes. Many of you, when you hear the term reuse, will think of one or both of the scenarios shown here: food serviceware or refill. Both of these are great, and we do want to see them expand. But when we talk about reuse in EPR programs, it's important to specify that we are talking about returnables. Returnable reusables are owned by producers or third-party reuse providers, and they get returned into the reuse system after each use. We covered this definition in our live stream last year around this time, so I won't fully repeat our definitions for return and refill, but we do have a very handy fact sheet for reference. I do, however, want to quickly recap the advantages of returnables. First of all, they closely map to our current single-use packaging systems across much of the supply chain. They are filled by producers or third-party packagers, distributed via e-commerce or in retail stores, and sold just like any other consumer packaged good. The fact that consumers can buy products in returnable, reusable packaging just like they would buy the same product in single-use packaging avoids common pitfalls with the refill model, namely concerns that tend to arise around hygiene or retail shelf space and consumer adoption, especially when reusable packaging is offered as the default. Oops, apologies. Returnables can be applied across many sectors, from personal care to home care and cleaning to fresh or non-perishable foods and beyond, even tertiary or e-commerce packaging. Lastly, compared to refillables, tracking return rates, or the number of reuse cycles for a given product or even an individual package, is less complicated for returnables because, well, they get returned. So now that we're on the same page and we know that we're focused on returnable reusables within packaging EPR systems, what is a best-in-class PRO to do to embrace reuse? We recommend starting by adopting a long-term vision and setting public reuse goals across programs. Publicly adopting a vision and goals not only signals to the public as well as state oversight agencies that the PRO is serious about its reuse commitments. It will also streamline program planning across jurisdictions, taking a step toward harmony among packaging EPR laws. We can find 3 types of reuse-related targets in existing statutes, and we suggest voluntarily adopting consistent targets for all 3 measures across packaging EPR programs. First, set a target for the overall market share of returnable reusable packaging. This is just the percentage of packaging on the market that is sold in returnable reusables out of all covered materials. A market share target is already set in California's statute, as well as in regulations in Maine and soon to be in Minnesota. You don't want to set this target higher than is feasible because rolling it back may erode the public's trust, but you don't want to set it too low either because that would signal a lack of true commitment and ambition. So it is a balance. Something like 15% market share for returnable reusables across all jurisdictions could do the trick as a starting point, with a longer term goal to maybe reach 30% in another 10 years, but hey, I'm just spitballing here. Next, set a return rate target to accompany the reuse rate. Return rates are absolutely critical to successful reuse systems. A statewide return rate target will be set in Minnesota and will be helpful everywhere, so establish this goal publicly as well. Individual return rates should be tied to the specifics of each packaging format and its break-even point for environmental and economic gains, but an overarching target could reflect an average, like 85% within 5 years, increasing to 90% within 10. Finally, a target for reduction of single-use packaging and packaging waste is required in 3 states, and reuse programs can help achieve these outcomes as well. However, source reduction is sometimes defined in statute as distinct from returnable reusable targets. This is where your refill models come in. Refill in store, on the go, or at home can achieve source reduction and should be a strategy to help reach these targets along with other interventions. Okay, so those are the targets. Once you've proudly announced your targets, step 2 as a best-in-class PRO is to offer financial incentives and technical assistance to member producers exploring reuse. Incentives are typically baked in via statute and regulations, but just so we're all on the same page, here is how we think they should be set to best support reuse. First of all, base fees should only be charged when reusables first enter the market. Each time they're recirculated after this point, the PRO should not collect a fee. This will inherently incentivize reusables with higher return rates. And then eco-modulated fees should further incentivize reuse, layering on top of the base fees, ideally by ensuring that the cost to introduce reusables onto the market is lower than the cost to introduce single-use packaging. In addition to the fee structure, a best-in-class PRO will actively promote reuse among its member producers. This is where that leadership really comes in. Ensure that they know that reusable packaging will help them lower their program fees. A best-in-class PRO should also provide technical assistance to producers who want to make a switch to reuse. One way to do this is to hire a dedicated full-time staff contact to field inquiries from members, provide resources, and make connections for them. And I know some of you are out there thinking, what about states like Colorado and California where reusables are exempt? How are we supposed to incentivize reusables if they don't even pay fees at all? We do have suggestions for those scenarios in the paper, but for the sake of time today, so we can get to our fabulous guest speakers, I'm not going to go into them in detail. Once we have public targets, incentives, and technical support in place, it's time for step 3, and this is the big one, of course, using EPR funds to build scaled reuse systems. A best-in-class PRO will dedicate a portion of its overall program budget from across producers, products, and material types to developing and maintaining reuse systems. And this is not a one-time thing, this is in perpetuity. The ultimate goal should be to create a shared interoperable reuse infrastructure across each packaging EPR jurisdiction with which any member producer can use. To get started, we suggest looking to existing reuse service providers and exploring the services they can provide as contractors to the PRO. We also suggest leveraging existing recycling infrastructure, including and especially DRS, deposit return systems, or bottle bill infrastructure where applicable. There really is no need to reinvent the wheel if collection infrastructure for post-consumer packaging already exists, and if consumers already use it to recycle, harness that infrastructure and those behaviors to collect reusables. This shared interoperable system is the key that unlocks scaled reuse in the CPG sector and for EPR compliance. It can be expanded over time and built upon, but it has to be the ultimate goal. And a wonderful co-benefit of this approach is that it can also unlock community-scale reuse among local food service establishments, venues, exempt businesses, etc., by enabling them or their reuse providers to plug into the same shared infrastructure. Last but very much not least, a best-in-class PRO is radically transparent. At the very least, it should align with the EU requirements for public reporting, which include progress toward reuse targets, info on the final whereabouts of materials, details on the financial management of reuse systems and contributions toward reuse from the budget, and clear selection procedures and criteria for contractors, which may include reuse service providers. There may not always be a statutory requirement to report all of the member brands with reusables on the market or each reusable packaging offering, but these would be excellent bonuses to boost public trust. In every packaging EPR program enacted to date in the US, reusable packaging is an opportunity. For a top-tier pro helping producers comply across multiple states, we see a few key synergies. Maine and Oregon boast the two highest performing deposit return systems in the country. In these states, leverage these high-performing bottle return systems and that infrastructure to collect all manner of returnable, reusable packaging. Collaborate with OBRC in Oregon and the soon-to-be-launched Beverage Cooperative in Maine to ensure recyclable bottles that make their way into the EPR stream are returned to the DRS while collecting reusables at depots, bag drop stations, and participating retailers. Speaking of DRS, focus on the beverage sector in Colorado where no DRS is in place and beverages are covered under the packaging EPR law. With little existing recycling infrastructure and maximum program flexibility for the pro, Colorado presents a perfect opportunity to build efficiencies into the program from the ground up. Design a statewide system that can take back recyclables alongside reusables. Co-locate washing and sorting infrastructure with MRFs or distribution centers to reduce transport distances. In California and Minnesota, there's a strong emphasis on achieving high return rates. So lean in by experimenting with regional approaches and different models, automated or manual returns, deposits or rewards or neither, and compare results between states to really optimize returns. In a nutshell, this is our playbook for a best-in-class PRO to embrace reuse in the US. There are many more details and ideas in the paper, so do check that out. But for now, I'm excited to welcome our three panelists who can shed more light on this and provide real-life examples. And unfortunately, Elizabeth couldn't be with us here live today. She's on a boat in the Indian Ocean. So we are going to try something a little different, and please bear with us. She has sent us a pre-recorded message, and we're going to play the audio from that message so you can all hear from her.
Thank you, Sydney, for that comprehensive introduction. You've done a great job encapsulating why this topic is so important now more than ever. And thank you, Upstream, for organizing today's webinar and publishing this report. Your leadership and authority on the topic are undeniable. I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to co-author Upstream's playbook on reuse in EPR. When Sydney and I first came together with this idea, we felt something was missing. From the dialogue we hear between key stakeholder groups, amongst the policymakers trying to make heads and tails of EPR, and equally critical from consumers. While the general public is not the target audience for this paper per se, I'd like to share a personal experience I had recently. You may notice that my background looks nothing like New York City, which is where I'm based. In fact, the reason I'm unable to join this webinar in person is because it will air when I am in the middle of the Indian Ocean, where I am right now, far from a decent internet connection. I've had the opportunity to teach a class on plastic pollution to university students studying while they and I sail the world these last couple months. Having spent the last 5 years deeply immersed in the work that we're all doing, I discovered some pretty shocking things during my first week in class. First, while the students understood the importance of breaking our dependence from fossil fuels, none of them knew that plastic is made from fossil fuels, and that continued, unabated use undermines the progress we're making with renewables. Likewise, packaging EPR was unknown to them. Perhaps more striking, they expressed confusion, incredulity, disappointment, and shame that the U.S. is so behind on this regulatory front, having grown up believing the U.S. is a leader in sustainability. After spiraling in despair, I brought their attention to reuse as a critical solution. Again, none of my students were at all aware about reuse as a solution, even as they've been experiencing it in the countries we've been visiting in Southeast Asia. I mention this anecdote because it woke me up to our current reality as much as I hope it woke them up. We can do better, and we must do better. To me, that is the central message driving this paper, and one I hope the Circular Action Alliance and every reader takes away from it. It's always helpful to have a North Star to guide our work and reaffirm our commitments. In the past few years, I've drawn inspiration from reusable packaging initiatives in Canada, Belgium, and Germany, to name just a few. But in particular, Citeo, France's producer responsibility organization, under the leadership of CEO Emmaneulle Bautista, who you will soon hear from, as well as her incredible reuse team, have provided endless guidance and support, as well as a value template from which to learn. I've had the chance to connect U.S. legislators and officials engaged in reuse implementation with Citeo, and they are actively bringing lessons from France back to the U.S. I will let Citeo share more about their pioneering work with you. I am especially a fan of their public education campaign, which plays on the notion of an encore, a delightful reprise, to make reuse understandable, fun, and culturally relevant. One thing you may not hear from them, which has struck me deeply, is their commitment to not only build a first-in-class reuse system, but to design it collaboratively and in an open source fashion for others to learn from and replicate. This is what sustainability, integrity, and leadership looks like in EPR. But it's not just in Europe where we can draw inspiration. As I left the coast of Southwest India, I thought back to all the pleasant surprises at the number of steps that I saw being taken, both formally and informally, to address the plastics crisis and develop locally suitable solutions. While implementation has come with challenges, India has enacted a rigorous framework for EPR, which I've seen effect during my time there. Single-use plastic bags, straws, cutleries, and other food serviceware are gone from many, if not most places, replaced with better alternatives, or better still, reusable ones. Store after store stocks steel tiffin boxes from the floor to the ceiling, equipping startups and individuals with the tools they need to use reusables and eat sustainably while eating away from home. And finally, despite continuing to see single-use sachets across the rural landscape, I've also seen local shops with the dozen or so 10-liter jugs containing soaps and detergents of all colors and types prominently displayed at the front of their store, beckoning customers to bring their own container and have the products they need dispensed in a bulk format. Again, I wish I could be with you all live today to share with you the urgency in aligning around the need for reuse and EPR. We know too well how important effective reuse systems are, and at the same time, the challenges posed by the barriers to reuse implementation. EPR is perhaps our most powerful tool in breaking down those barriers, and so I hope you will join me, Upstream, and many others in calling on CAA to follow our reuse and EPR playbook. Thank you.
All right, I hope that worked for you all. I know it's awkward that you had to look at me while listening to Elizabeth. We'll patch her video in to the recording so that you can all see it. But without further ado, I would really like to thank and welcome our panelists from Citeo to join me on screen so we can say hi to you. Thank you for being here. And I will turn it over to Emmaneulle and Valentin to tell us all about how Citeo is embracing reuse in France.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Sydney. Thank you, Elizabeth, as well, for the messages. So we are going to share with you what we are currently putting in place in France. Of course, do not hesitate if you have any questions or even for clarity only. I would be glad to answer. So maybe very quickly, but you know what's a PRO, so it's already a very good thing. So Citeo, we are the PRO for France for household packaging, and tomorrow also for industrial packaging. So we are a non-profit company with a mission, which is to reduce, reuse, recycle to reach 100% circularity of packaging. Maybe just so you know, how do we actually use the fees that we currently have from our 80,000 companies? So we have a current turnover of around 1.3 billion euros in France, and half of it almost is used for financing the collection of the yellow bin that we have in France. So we are paying the municipalities to go collect the different household packaging within this bin to then send it to sorting, which represents a quarter of our expenses. So the sorting of the packaging, so then they can be actually recycled at the end. Then you will see that we also have some obligations and actions around littering. So how do we avoid littering and how do we actually clean? And so financing the littering, the cleaning of littering that is done by citizens. Then we have a part of it that is also used for reuse, eco-design, and R&D. Turns out that in the French law that actually started in 2020, so it has 5 years now, there was an objective of reuse packaging that was to be put on the market, which is an objective of 10% of reused packaging by 2027. In addition to that objective, we have to spend, as a PRO, 5% of our turnover on the development of reuse. And we will then show you how we use those 5%. Then we have a part that is used for communication and for other support operations and some additional things. But it's not linked to the subject today. So if you have questions, of course, we'll be glad to go more into details if you want. So as I just said, we have an obligation in France to reach the 10% of reuse packaging. It's all types of packaging all together, not only for drinks, it's really all types of products. And so we have this 5% of our fees that we need to use for development of reuse. We will also have, so it has been signed end of last year, the PPWR, which is a regulation applicable to all European countries. We have almost the same objective, which is it is 10% of reused packaging by 2030, but it's only for drinks, except for wine and spirits and milk. Okay, just so you know. So we don't know yet how France is going to actually use this objective. Is it going to align on the European one, or is it going to go a little bit further by keeping the same objective? The two options are possible. So now maybe going into how do we use the 5% of our turnover for the development of reuse. We have two main actions or way of using this money. We will focus on the second one, but the first one, so just so you know, is actually a call for projects. So we are financing projects for reusable packaging on any type of reuse, any type of product, any type of new experiments, R&D, whatsoever. The idea is really to be able to actually make people try to see what works and what doesn't work. So we are, of course, we are going to gather all the information coming out from those experiments to then make synthesis and then share to the whole ecosystem the main conclusions and how do we use it for the future development of reuse. Okay, so that's the first part. Just to give you big figures, but we have financed 144 projects in 2023. It will be more than 200 in 2024, and it might be increasing in the coming years. Then we are going to use also a part of those financing to develop a mutualized systems. Okay, so we are starting by one, which is our reuse project. which aims at developing reuse for food packaging sold in retail stores. Okay, so it's only a part of reuse, of course, but it's a huge part, and it's a part when the need for mutualization is the biggest. So what we want to build with this reuse system is really an industrial scheme that is mutualized, national at the scale of France, competitive, meaning compared to single use, so that it doesn't cost more to reuse the packaging and to buy a new one, and it's standardized within different type of packaging, formats, and products. Okay, that's really the big idea. So how did we, so the loop, but nothing new there. So we will have a loop of those reused packaging. And the key part that we are working on right now is this coordination for this loop. So we will have two ways of coordinating the loop. There is Citeo playing one of the role, which is really the role for harmonization, trying to put standards along the whole loop. Standards for the packaging, of course, but also for cleaning. How do we make sure that cleaning facilities have the right system to be sure that they meet the expectations of all the industrials that will put the packaging on the market, and so on. And then we will have a coordinator that we are currently selecting, that we will finance in part, and that will be in charge of making sure that the loop works, okay, and that the systems work. So they will go and contract with collectors that are going to go collect all the empty packaging within the stores. They will make sure that those packaging are then sorted, that the one that will be cleaned in mutualized cleaning facilities will be rightly cleaned, and then that they will go back to the producers so they can be reused again. Okay, so this coordination is really key, and we are currently working on this part. So how did we define this kind of ideal scheme? So we worked with the whole ecosystem. Okay, so we started with a few pioneers. Okay, in a very a tight steering committee, beginning of 2023. So most of them are also our board members. And the one that wanted to be involved in reuse. And so they asked us, yes, we want you to lead this way to mutualized reuse system. So you see the names here. So it was kind of the more strategic aspect of the system. Then we worked on specific thematics to develop the future system. So we had, for example, the offer for the consumer. We worked on how to collect the different empty packaging. How are we going to work on the deposit? How are we going to work on cleaning, and so on and so on. So we had a lot of different themes, different sprints per themes, with a lot of different industrials. So we had between 40 and 50 industrials for each sprint to develop the system that we wanted to put in place. And then once we had this kind of ideal system that we built, we shared it with the whole ecosystem during what we called the reuse days, where anyone who wanted to come were most welcome to join and to contribute to improving the system, or at least have the information of what is going to happen in the future. So that's kind of the system we put in place. And now in 2025, we are, it's really the year for the first scale up. Meaning, so we have this kind of theoretical system that we want to put in place. And now we are going to implement it in first 4 regions of France. So you see them in blue in this slide. That accounts for 16 million consumers. We expect to have around 30 million reusable standardized packaging that we'll put on the market. Not only standardized, we will have standardized packaging, but also iconic. Okay. We will have around 1,000 collect points in those 4 regions, and we will have several packaging references. Okay, so we will start with the standardized packaging, so the 1 liter. Do you have an animation? No. Yes, so we have the ones that you can see on the slide. So the 1 liter bottle for juices, soups, and so on. We'll have the beer bottle of 75 centiliters. We'll have 1 liter bottle for water, lemonade, sodas, and so on. And we will have, and that's kind of also of a new thing, some jars as well to be sure that we don't have only drinks, but also it's possible for compotes, for dairy products, for dry foods, for cereals, for conserves, well, anything that can actually go into that kind of packaging. So how do we expect the system to work? We believe that we have 3 keys to be sure that it's successful. The first one, and it's really a key one, how do we make this competitive and attractive? Okay, so what we showed with the system that we built with the whole ecosystem is that in maybe a few years' time, okay, once it's mature, meaning that we are able to reuse several billions of packaging, we know that the system is at par with single use. Okay, around that par. Of course, it depends on how much each company buys its single-use packaging, but in average, it will be at par. The question now is how do we get there? Because it's true when it's mature, but it's not true now. So for this activation phase, we are going to finance a lot of the first infrastructures that will be shared between all the producers. So we are going to finance the equipments that will be in the stores. We are going to finance some of the collection operations that will be made by the collectors. We are going to finance the first pool of standardized packaging that will be put on the market. And we are going to see where we can also have another role to play. We are also helping the cleaning facilities, for example, to get up to speed and up to the expectations of the FMCG companies. So that's how, in the short term, we manage to make it competitive. And then hoping that with the volumes coming up, it will be mature and it will be competitive anyway by itself. Of course, the other part that is absolutely key is to be sure of food safety. Okay, so how do we make sure that reuse does not pose any problem? So it's a lot of work with the cleaning facilities. It's fine with the drinks today in glass bottles, but we are also working on other types of products. So for example, for more pasty products, it will be maybe more difficult to have the right cleaning. We will also have other materials than glass that will be reusable at the end of the day. So we'll work on plastics, on stainless steel. So we have to make sure that everything works in different loops. And then, of course, standardization to be sure that the system is optimized environmentally and economically. And so how do we try to share at their maximum the same packaging to avoid transport distance? Then another part that I haven't talked about yet, which is also which will be at the end of the day what decides if it works or not, is the consumer. How do we make sure that the consumer buys the reusable product and return them at the stores and buy them again? Okay, that's really what we are trying to achieve. So convenience will be key. We need to have something convenient for the consumer. We have to have something harmonized also in the way we communicate about reuse to be sure that it's the same way, whatever the store that you are going into. And then we have to take it into account all the drivers for consumer. Not all consumers will actually adopt reuse for environmental reasons. So we have to find also ways to seduce them with other drivers that can be the price, that can be the brand, maybe the product experience, the quality, and so on. So here you can see what we are going to actually do very concretely in the stores. So we are going to work on a new design with new colors. It's something, so the purple that you see here is something that is actually not very much used in retail stores currently. So that's why we choose to try to make this purple the new reuse color to have something that's really flashy and can actually seduce the consumer. Then, of course, we also, in addition to what we are going to do in stores, such as you just saw, we are going also to make some mass media communication, okay? Because reuse does not exist currently in the mind of French citizens, okay? So we will start, and we have started end of last year with some familiarization with the term reuse, okay? So we have launched, and we will continue to launch a national campaign okay, to explain what is reuse. You are already doing it in your day-to-day, but it will arrive then even more importantly in the future. Then we are going to work more on driving the adoption. So with some kind of adaptation of this national campaign for the regional launch. Okay, so for the launch in the 4 regions. So we are currently working on the messages. And then we'll work on how do we actually keep the consumer and the citizen involved and engaged into this change in behavior. Okay, we can maybe switch that maybe to detail, and that's it. So I hope it was comprehensible, and I apologize for my accent if it was not.
I'll never apologize for your accent, first of all. But thank you so much. Yes, that was wonderful. And Emmaneulle, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that?
No, that's fine.
Okay, that was a crazy echo. Thank you. So I have so many questions for you both, and we probably won't be able to get to them all. And I know we have many people asking questions in the chat as well. Just a reminder, folks, you're welcome to put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom, and we will do our best to get to them in the time that we have. But first of all, I just want to point out, I noted you mentioned the purple, and folks may find that familiar if they were following the Petaluma pilot that Closed Loop Partners ran in California earlier this year. They also found that purple seems to be kind of an underutilized color in the packaging space. So I wonder if purple is just the color of reuse now.
Maybe, that would be great.
So, okay, my first question for you is, you talked a lot about the importance of having these coordinators, and you know, Citeo, you have a coordination role that is obviously very important, and you're also going to select one or more sort of contractors as coordinators. And I'm wondering if you could speak to, I know you're still in the process, but what is your process for selecting contractors or reuse providers? Like, how are you going about deciding that?
So actually for this activation phase, it might not be what we will do for the national part, okay? But for the activation phase, when we have to make reuse work, so that actually we can develop it more widely, we are selecting. So currently, so this week, as we speak, we are selecting what we call a service provider, okay? And this service provider will be the one that will actually make fix a fee for the producers, okay, for the industrials that will pay this fee to have packaging back. Okay, so that will pay a fee that we hope will be close to what they would pay for single-use packaging. Okay, and they pay this fee, and then the service provider will contract with all the different players, actors in the value chain. So they will contract with the stores to say, okay, I will have someone collect in your store whenever you want, or as schedule and so on. They will then contract with the cleaners as well, and they will actually deal with this loop and be able then to send back the different packaging to their owners or to the different producers if it's standardized packaging.
Okay, let's talk about those cleaners. How is the washing of those jars and containers going to be handled? Do you need to build a new washing center or new washing centers, or were they already in place? And do you think you will end up needing to build any new wash facilities as you expand nationally?
So we hope not. We have a specificity in France that we already have some mutualized cleaning facilities, okay? Even though reuse is not yet very present on the French market. So of course we are going to use the existing cleaners that are on the market, and that's also why we actually targeted these 4 regions as a start, for 2 main reasons. First, they are very good in the sorting just for recyclables. For example, they are very high performance. They have the highest performance in France. So we know that there is maybe a right field, I would say, for the development of reuse. And because also they have an ecosystem that is already active there of cleaners, collectors, and so on. So it's kind of it's supposed to be the right test for it to work. Now we are actually going to start the activation phase with the 2 first bottles that you saw. So the 1 liter wide mouth bottle and the 75 centiliters beer bottle. Because it's the easiest. It's in glass. We know it's easily cleaned. We have the right technology and processes to clean them. So it will be the start. The jars, we do not have yet the right way of cleaning them. So we are working on this aspect in parallel to be ready maybe in a few months after the activation. So we are trying to work on this aspect. And so that's why also we are financing the cleaners in this first phase to help them get into conformity. So we have an audit grill that we developed, and then we are going to help them really scale up on this grill to be sure that once again there is no issue regarding allergens, glass pieces, and so on into the packaging.
Wow. Okay. And you mentioned that the region where you're starting in northwestern France already has really good recycling sorting, and I find that really interesting. So how are you, we keep telling, folks in the US, you have to leverage the existing recycling system wherever you can. So how is your new reuse program going to interact, if at all, with the existing recycling infrastructure?
So for now, it won't, to be honest, except at the consumer level. Okay, but for now, because in France, contrary to most of European countries, we do not have yet a deposit system for recyclables, for bottles in PET, for example. However, it's something that we do believe that we need to put in place, both for increasing the recycling rate, of course, but also to increase the reuse rate. Because reuse, as I said, there will be a deposit on the packaging, and that's how we will track where the packaging are. So there will be a deposit in this packaging, and of course, if a consumer see the same product with a deposit and the same one without deposit, there is a chance that they choose the one without deposit. So we do believe that having deposits on single use and on reuse is also a way to promote, well, actually both. So it's a win-win situation. So we do believe that in the future, we will need to put in place a shared system. So what we call a consigne mixed, so a mixed deposit system for the two aspects, and where the synergies will be much higher between recycling and reuse.
Okay, fascinating. Okay, I have a different type of question for you both now, which is just how the heck did you get your members to agree to standardized packaging? How did you do it?
It's a good question. Actually, it was fairly easy. So we know that we will have we still have a coexistence of iconic and standardized packaging. So what we have for the activation, just to give you an example, we hope to have around 60% standardized and 40% iconic. So of course, there will be some brands where the shape of their packaging is absolutely key, and you probably see who I'm talking about. So we know that they will keep their iconic, and it's fine because they will put so much volumes on the market that they will help the optimization of the system and to lower the cost. And for all the others, they were actually quite eager to do that. We've developed from scratch because some standardized packaging already existed on the market, but several references were existing for the same product or the same format. And of course, that's not what we want to do. We really want to have the narrowest possible number of references, okay, so that the system works and is once again the most optimized possible. And so it was actually they really worked with us on this to select what is the right format, the right color, the right material, and we are still continuing to work with them on the future ones. There will be trays at some point. We'll probably have bowls and so on. So it's something that will be never ending somewhere. But it's to all the producers to say, okay, we want to agree on a specific format that we believe is the one that will work best with consumers. And they played the game. They're really engaged. So that's great.
Well, that's really encouraging to hear. I don't think we have seen that level of excitement yet in the US about standardizing packaging, but I do think that many of the companies here are the same ones that are your members, and they do understand that eventually some packaging will need to be standardized. So we're sort of starting to get there, but I don't think we're quite where you are.
But maybe one figure that I can share to try to convince. When you do not have standardized packaging, so with a higher number of references, the cost of reuse is at least 30% higher. So if you want to be at some point competitive with single use, you don't have the choice.
Yeah, that's a powerful stat. Thank you.
And it's also actually an interest for producers. When the prices of glass is high, of course, it's very much interesting to have reuse that can be more competitive.
Absolutely. And you mentioned cost, which is where I wanted to go next. So, one thing that you did mention in your presentation, but I want to make sure everyone caught it, is that your fund for reuse, the 5% of your budget that is going to reuse, that is coming from the entire operating budget, correct? That is not coming from only specific producers or only producers who are interested in reuse. It's coming from everybody.
Yes, it's coming from everybody. We have actually a kind of a specific fee calculation model, but just so you know, we have a part of the fee that is based on weight and a part that is based on the number of units of packaging. So it's 90% and 10%, okay? And the 5% that we have to spend on reuse is just shared between the two and equally about the different types of products, materials, and so on. Yeah. It's in the general budget, as you said.
Which is the way that makes the most sense. But I still think, again, companies in the US are struggling to wrap their heads sometimes around this concept. And they constantly ask us, well, shouldn't this money just come from the brands that are interested in reuse? And we say to them, no, that's not going to work because that will end up disincentivizing reuse by making it more expensive to try to buy into the system. But can you speak a little more to that? Yeah, speak to the economics for how these systems work, how it's going to work long term.
No, it's a very good question because we know that, and that's all about PRO and EPR system. It's about mutualization of the costs. That's key, and that's how it works. And yes, sometimes maybe people that will not do reuse, well, they will say, I'm paying too much for what I'm getting because I don't have the service behind it. But they have to think also about the future. Maybe at some other point, they will get some money for their specific packaging because they will be, I don't know, collected with a deposit system for recycling or for R&D experimentation that will be financed and so on. So what we are trying to bring is really how everyone will win at some point. But it's true that it works at first because we have this 5%. We have also the objective in the law that is actually mutualized between all the producers, and that helps. So it means that everyone needs to, all together, needs to reach the 10%. So it really helps also with the mutualization. But once reuse will be more and more pregnant, that's not US, sorry. Once reuse will be there, then of course the cost will be too high for that. So at this point, we might need to find some other ways to finance it. Okay, so it's really also a time of really a matter of timing. So how do we start with the most mutualized financing possible, but then we try to target the one who will benefit from the system.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thanks for breaking that down. Okay, so we've got a lot of questions from the audience. I'm going to try to pull some in now for you all. So we have a question about what legal or regulatory provisions have been most critical for enabling the viability or success of your approach? And you kind of went over these at the start. You've got the European-wide regulation, the packaging and packaging waste reduction law, and then you've also got a specific national waste prevention law in France. But I think this person was really looking at, as U.S. states are adopting these packaging EPR laws, and we have 5 so far, but more coming, fingers crossed. Are there regulatory details outside of just those targets or anything specific from those laws that really have like the most impact on making reuse viable?
So yes, the starting point was really, so there was already something going on in France. So people wanted to try reuse. Then there was the law that fixed this ambition. And the second one is really the way that, how do we finance it? So the fact that we had to spend 5%, it brings this actually, where does the money come from? That's the main questions. So it brings this money from somewhere. And that's great to have this mutualization possible, thanks to the PRO that have to put 5% on it. So that's really what brought it up. Then the second part is maybe that be sure that how do we say that, the state, I would say, or whoever decides is actually involved then in what's going on, and be sure that, okay, it's advancing at the right pace as they wanted, that there is still a little bit of pressure. Okay, we need to have some liberty to do what we expect and we believe will be the most efficient, but we need to be sure that the law is not just another law, basically, but that it will be implemented at some point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we're seeing some of that in our US laws. You know, there are different ways that it's been enacted to date. So I do encourage folks to check out that table or our paper. But you know, in Oregon, producers, the PRO has to finance basically a grant program that the state will run. So it's differently managed, but it is essentially a percentage of the overall budget that it's like a reuse fee, and everyone pays, and it goes into this state managed fund that will then be doled out. Interestingly, I think in Oregon, the PRO can then reapply for its own funds back from the state if they want, but so can public entities or anything else. And then, you know, you see different strategies being employed in different states. So that's just one model. We haven't really seen that replicated, but there's a bill in Washington state this year, not yet a law, that would do something similar, but the PRO would manage those funds. So a little bit more like you have in France. I have a sort of a practical question from the audience, which is how are you going to track the reusable containers, and how has that factored into the system design?
So we do not track specific packaging, so not one packaging, but we'll track the volumes, because so we'll have a barcode that will be specific for the activation phase and for reuse. So we will know, we are going to play the role of I don't know how you say in English, so I will try something and you tell me if it's not understandable, but the compensation chamber. So meaning that we will get the deposit when it's paid by the retailers to the producers. Okay, so the producers will pay us the deposit, and we will send it back once to the consumer, once the consumer actually brings back its packaging. And then we are going to readapt all the financing according to the volumes that were put on the market, that were actually returned by the consumer in the different stores and so on. And so that's how we are going to follow the volumes as a quantity. So we know exactly what is put on the market, what is sold to the consumer, and what is returned by the consumer.
Yeah, which seems a little less labor intensive than a QR code on every single item. But
we hope. We'll
yeah,
see.
we'll find out. We'll see your lessons learned. And I'm looking at the time. We are so close to the end of the hour here, so unfortunately we're not going to get to too many more questions. But I'll ask one more question from the audience, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. So for our finale question, what advice do you have for our US packaging PROs? We only have one registered so far, Circular Action Alliance, and they are in 3 states, likely to be in a few others. But we may also get some from Canada are interested in looking around. So for any packaging PROs in the US, you know, they've got these brand new laws. They're standing up brand new programs that have never existed in the past, and they're already coming out of the gate with reuse requirements. Do you have any advice for them?
To develop reuse?
Yes.
For me, a PRO has a unique chance of being in the middle, in between all the stakeholders, our system. So take this role seriously, take the responsibility that it represents, and bring everyone around the table to define what will be the best system. Try the consensus. We know it won't be very easy, and of course, then you decide. That's the key. We try the consensus and then decide, else we can also just wait for years and years.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's practical. It's inclusive but practical. With that, I think that we need to kind of bring things to a close here. I'm getting a message from our host that it's about that time, but I will just give you a chance if you have any final thoughts, either of you, that you'd like to impart. Now would be the time.
No, thanks a lot for inviting us.
Yeah, absolutely. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you very much to everyone who is on the audience watching. Just a reminder, we will be sharing out the recording. We'll patch in Elizabeth's video so you don't have to look at my face the whole time. We will share the paper and all of the links that we mentioned in the chat as well. So you'll get all the resources that we've mentioned. We will share Citeo's slides as well with their permission. And yeah, we're really excited to see the future of reuse in packaging EPR programs here in the US, and we will obviously be following your progress in France. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You too.